These were the surviving pre-Indo-European languages before the rise of Rome. Now let's look at them one by one. Lemnian in the Adriatic Sea on an island or two. This one went extinct quite early with the expansion of Greece, as did Etruscan further south on Crete, which may have been late Minoan. In the Italian peninsula, Etruscan, which created a magnificent civilization, Piceni, which we're very unsure about, to the northeast, south of Venice. Rhaetian or Rhaetian in the Alps in southern Germany, on Sardinia and parts of Corsica, Paleo-Sardinian, in present-day Catalonia and Spain, Iberian, which was quite a large language, Tartessian, in the southwest of the Iberian Peninsula. Each of these languages died out quite early, comparatively, to the last language, Proto-Basque, which evolved into Basque and into the present day. And this fascinating language is what we get into now. Hi, I'm Benjamin, and this is Euskara, the Basque language, in the Basque country, Euskadi. This language is unlike anything I've ever tried to learn in any sense whatsoever. So I'm not going into how the language is built up and how it works. This is a history of the language itself, its fascinating story. This is an agglutinative language, gluing onto the ends to create meanings, like Japanese, Finnish, Turkish do. Many people have tried to find bridges between Basque languages even in Native America, the Caucasus Mountains. It's a mystery, and that's what makes its story so mysterious. Let's get into this now. Basque is so old, there is no way we can date its origins. This is not just before historical record, it is pre-civilization, before the Bronze Age. Miguel Unamuno, a playwright and professor, noted existing similarities for words for stone tools, like for knife, aitzo, axe, aikora, and hoe, aitzor. In relation to heights, a word for stone. Whether these four words each have linked roots is a matter of debate. But the fact is the Basque language is so old we cannot disprove it. The seeds of the Basque language, or whatever it grew out of, may have its roots in the Neolithic Age, 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Some people say as far back as 8,000 years ago, and whatever that grew out of, 34,000 years ago potentially, the root of the people it came from. We just don't know, and we will likely never know. As noted with this map, Basque does not seem to be related to the other pre-Indo-European languages that we know of. Judging by megaliths and stone tools alone, which does not tell us what language they spoke, the Basque country sits within what was an Atlantic coastal culture during the stone changing into the Copper Age and then Bronze Age. See my video on the Cucuteni culture of Romania and Ukraine? In that era, the culture of Eastern Europe would have been very different from the Atlantic. This was before horses came into Europe. And like the Native Americans and Australian Aboriginals, what we see in lands before horses and deep ocean sailing is much greater variation in the language families that are spoken. From megaliths and stone tools, we can say that the Atlantic coast had its own culture. We just don't know what it was. The Basque language is the last heir to this ancient heritage. The earliest writing of any kind that could be Basque is from the 2nd century BCE, with a mosaic found in Medjugorje. Some argue this is Iberian, not Basque. It is most likely a mixture of languages, as was common in the age. The first whole phrases written in Basque are from the 1st century BCE, on the hand of Irulegi, only found in 2021. So get digging, maybe there are Basque writings to be found in the ground that could make you famous. The hand says, Sorioneku, of good fortune, The rest is a dedication to religious deities of some kind. Again, we just don't know, it's so old. This language in this period is called Aquitaine. This name comes from a Roman province and later a region of France. In truth, this language may have been a sister language to Basque, but more probable, Basque grew out of this language during the Roman Empire. The geographic area is much bigger than its expanse today. Our knowledge of this area, which was far away from the centers of power in the Roman Empire, is really vague. Inscriptions in the 1st century of the Common Era spread out over an area much wider than the Basque country of today. And what we are seeing here is probably a range of Basque-related dialects, which may have formed another language at the far northeastern end. As with much of early Basque origins, we just don't know. Place names go as far east as Catalonia, showing Basque origins, and north into France almost to the river Garonne. Strangely, in the south, the river Ebro is a very consistent barrier over the centuries. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century saw a decline in records, and the areas of the empire around Basque lands were held by various barbarian kingdoms, so our knowledge of the Basque language from the late 5th century to the 10th century is almost nothing. As kingdoms rose and fell around them, the Basque language was itself changing, growing as a language, and sheltered from conquest by both the Pyrenees and Iberian ranges of mountains, but changed occasionally by peoples who came through the mountains, on their way usually to somewhere else. By the 10th century, Basque begins to appear in the margins of texts found in the monasteries of La Rioja. In the 11th century, a French monk, Émeric Picot, gives us a few Basque words in the descriptions of his travels to Santiago in the far west. He is not very kind to Basques and says they dress ugly and drink ugly. Basque, however, was expanding territory in the High Middle Ages through the Kingdom of Navarre, under King Sancho VII, reigning from 1194 to 1234, almost the same exact years as Llywelyn the Great in Wales. The Kingdom of Navarre became much more stable. It is said King Sancho VII left behind a library of over 1 million books. How many of these books had the Basque language in them, I wonder? It does not seem to be very many, and Basque was clearly losing prestige to Romance languages, and especially Church Latin. It wasn't a language used in any kind of official documentation. To the east, however, in Huasca, in Aragon, Basque was banned from being spoken at local fairs. Basque speakers were forced out of parts of northern Castile as well. This shows us other kingdoms along Navarre's borders thought of the Basque language as being lesser than theirs during the High Middle Ages, or were not comfortable with competing against a language that was so different. Liking the video? Help keep the channel going. Buy me a coffee, leave a super like. Join me on Patreon. A like would be nice. Drop a comment, what questions do you have? Let me know, and now we'll be getting back to the video. The Kingdom of Castile conquered most of Navarre. A part of the kingdom still held north of the mountains. Of course, this would have a bad impact on the Basque language. It would have lost high rank and prestige. However, in 1545, Bernard Etxepare published the first printed book in the Basque language, called Linguae Vasconum Primitae. He wrote, "Other people thought that they could not write about you, but now they have forgotten that they were mistaken." So clearly he knew he was the first to do this, and was making a fashion statement of it. Just 17 years later, in 1562, a Basque dictionary was published, a big important thing at the time. Between 1567 and 1602, Lazarraga wrote a shepherd novel full of poems and songs in Basque. He did not publish it, but most of the manuscript survived, and it shed light on southern Basque dialects in Alava, which have now largely been lost. In 1571, the Basque language got a Bible, very important for linguistic survival in the age, published by Johannes Leizarraga. It did something important, which is it tried to unify the northern Basque dialects, which helped Basque keep itself together as one language in a way that is not unlike what happened with the Welsh language and our Bible. By this time, negative stereotypes of Basque speakers, unable to speak Spanish properly, were entering Basque literature, which shows us the Spanish authorities looked down on the Basque language in the 16th century, even this early. However, back to the dialects. Pedro Achular wrote Garo in 1643, a work teaching morality and good character. But what matters here for us is that he wrote it in a polished form of the Lepurdi dialect. Over 3 centuries later, Koldo Michelena, Gabriel Aresti, and others would use this to help create a unified form of Basque, so that no matter their local speech, folk could talk to each other. Over the rest of the 17th century, proverbs were published, as well as further religious works and guidebooks for sailors crossing the sea. Even studies on medicine were published in Basque. So this is being used, being read, and thought in through high culture. It just has no state representation. Crossing into the 18th century and the Enlightenment, further dictionaries were written, and the first Basque grammar is seen in 1729. Publishing a grammar in your language is quite an accomplishment. However, just a year later, the first written record of a device called the ring was recorded in a place called Beasain. Like many minority languages around the world, Basque faced being banned in schools and its children beaten for speaking Basque. A ring was passed around to children speaking Basque. The last child to have it on was beaten. Unfortunately, it was quite effective. On a lighter, happier note, 34 years later in 1764, the Association of Friends of the Basque Country was set up by a group of scholarly gentlemen led by Count Xavier Munibi. This group was the first higher education institution to exist in Basque areas. Its motto in Basque, Irarak Bat, means in 3-1, symbolizing political unity in Basque lands. This group aimed to spread fine arts and sciences, and was a much-needed boost to the Basque language, even if indirectly. However, from 1759, and the ascent of Charles III to the throne of Spain, anti-Basque legislation grew. Over the border, the Kingdom of France became the Republic of France, whose extremist liberal and universalist ideology sought to erase all differences between men, and for this, the minority language cultures of France had to be murdered in the name of social liberation, progress, and equality. The Basque language was seen as counter-revolutionary, a blindfold to the opened eyes of the Enlightenment. France still suffers from this extremist liberal ideology today, and for it Basque, across the border, over the Pyrenees in France, faces a tough struggle against this ideology to reclaim its heritage. Charles IV came to the throne after his father in Spain, and continued his father's anti-Basque policies, and forbade Basque plays from being performed. Spain entered a dark time in the early 19th century. Napoleon overran Tutera in the south of Navarre in 1808. In Spanish, this city is called Tutela. The Basque country between France and Spain saw more than its fair share of death. In fact, I may make a video on how crazy this is, let me know if you want it, but Spain from 1800 to 1936 lost an empire, was invaded, then fought 3 civil wars before having a coup d'etat with a brief dictatorship, a republican revolution, and then a 4th civil war, followed by a long dictatorship lasting into the 1970s. That is crazy. I guess the Spanish like drama. However, as periods of chaos can do, this created a renaissance in the Basque country. I mean, just look at the Renaissance in northern Italy. Many of Leonardo da Vinci's best inventions were about killing people, because Italy was divided into a bunch of bickering states, and Leonardo da Vinci could sell designs about how they could more efficiently kill their enemies and make money. Likewise, the wars in Spain created a Basque Renaissance by forcing Basque people to think about their national identity. Whilst the French side of the border was quite bad for Basque in the Republic, in the Spanish Basque country, the chaos allowed cultural institutions to take root. A man named Anton Abadia created something called Euskal Loraiakoak, the Basque Flower Games. These are cultural contests for music, dance, and poetry. The first novel in Basque, Peru Abarca, was written back in 1802, but there was no motive to get it published at the time because so few people wanted to read Basque. It took a Basque Renaissance in culture and economics to get it printed, and finally in 1881, the first novel in Basque saw the light of day. It only took 79 years, but he got it done. I'll put the guy's name on the screen. Basques began forming groups and organizations linking language, culture, and politics. This was a national reawakening, but I must note this was not happening in isolation. This was directly influenced by the mid-late 19th century national awakenings in Belgium and Catalonia. In Catalonia, it was called La Renaissance. The Basques, as they often have with Catalan ideas, borrowed Catalan ideas and then took them to the next level, doing even better. Part of the Basque Renaissance was political, which I do not want to delve too deep into, but it would be misleading to have a history of the Basque language without political stuff, nor mentioning Sabin Arana, this man. He was a character, to say the least. He gave Basques their flag, their national anthem, their first real political party, a string of books on the language, a Basque library through his brothers, and he helped kickstart a Basque language revival of sorts. He certainly initiated a political revival, but he died young, only 38. In truth, maybe it was a hidden blessing, because Spain was changing and his politics were not going to fit well into the new 20th century economic ideologies emerging at the time of his death in 1903. He was an ethno-nationalist, racist, and a militant Catholic, which, dare I say, please don't be offended, Spanish people, is very Spanish, actually. But given what his fellow Basques were saying about their own language at the time, I kind of understand why Sabin Arana shifted so far to the right as a planned move on the chessboard to help the Basque language. A new religious faith in Hegelian forms of Marxism, which believes in a universalist utopia of workers, brought about by the disproven economic theories of Karl Marx, was beginning to infect Basque society in the late 19th century. Do you remember Miguel Unamuno? He had this to say about the Basque language at a Flower Games event in 1901. The Basque language cannot adapt to modern life. Bilbao speaking Basque is a contradiction. The Basque language is extinct Let's bury it wholly. If any of my Welsh audience is watching, this may sound a bit like the early Labour Party in Wales. And it is the same ideology, rooted ultimately in the extremist liberal ideas of the French Revolution. Socialism took root in the Basque country, and many Basques saw the language as something blocking their path to ushering in a world of socialism without nations, faith, or heritage. A world without any roots, nations, or faith sounds like my idea of pure hell. So Sabin Arana, who gave a great deal to the Basque language, his jerking further to the right may have just been a way to get a few of his countrymen to snap out of their childish Marxism to save the language. I don't know. I need to read more about that guy. The same year that Miguel Unamuno said that at the Flower Games in 1901, an organization called Euskotzaleen Biltzara was founded by Martin Guibot, who, as his name suggests, spent much of his life in the French-occupied part of the Basque country. Euskotzaleen Biltzara, which means Basque Fan Congress in Basque, was set up to promote the Basque language and literature. Quite a bold thing to do in 1901, and Sabino Reno was among the founders. A lot was going on for Basque in the early 20th century. The first Basque opera was performed in 1911, Mendi Mendian, catchy name. Probably through exposure to the French Republic, a Basque academy was built in 1918. A Basque magazine, Sabuco GARCÍA, was added to Basque newspaper publications. However, the economy of all of Iberia suffered because Spain did not get involved in World War I. Yes, war is completely bad, but it makes a lot of money for a nation-state. And if you are not at war when other countries are around you, ironically this can wreck your economy in certain cases, and this completely wrecked the economy of Spain. This both ended the Basque national renaissance by splitting its economy in 3 different directions, with war production on the French side and class war divisions on the Spanish side, and led to a coup d'etat in Spain, in which Miguel Primo de Rivera became dictator from 1923. Basque language political activists were sent into exile or crushed. The Renaissance was over. Or was it? With the financial crash in 1929, the dictatorship of de Rivera slowly fell apart, and a republic was set up in 1931, with the Spanish king fleeing the realm. The Basque Renaissance began to show signs of rebirth. Basque singing championships were held in 1935. Basque language newspapers were published, and academic work on restoring the language began again. But Spain was about to have its 4th civil war in 100 years, and this one would be by far the worst. There are 2 sides to every story. More than 2, actually. I am saying this because my view on the Spanish Civil War is controversial. This was not a fight between good and evil, as many would like you to believe. It was a fight between evil, hidden behind stability, and evil, hidden behind equality. 2 different kinds of evil fighting each other. One evil would kill you and say it was for the good of all people. The other evil would kill you and say it is for the good of Spain. Whilst Catalonia was much more unified behind one form of the 2 evils, in the Marxist Popular Front, the Basque country was more split between nationalists and Marxists. If Sabino Rena had lived into the 1930s, there is no telling what he would have done. He hated Marxists and he hated Spain. The end goal of Marxists, no matter their promises of equality, is to abolish differences, which means in the end, you must abolish nations. And if you are going to abolish nations, erasing languages and heritage is one of the first steps to do that. Do not mistake this as me liking Franco, who helped the Nazis, who would kill me for my Jewish faith. The rebels in Bilbao put under siege from General Franco's troops had support from the communist regime in Moscow, who at the time was starving millions of Ukrainians to death and killing Jewish rabbis. This era produced some horrific art in the Basque language, and it's sad to say, but the Basque language is richer for it, that it was able to express sadness of this level and horror. The Basque country and the Basque language was caught in a bad place. Several leading Basques, unable with a clean conscience to side with the evil of communism, tried to strike a deal with the fascists, but General Franco was much harsher and fanatical than he let on at first. He sought a single Spain with one language, Spanish. If you were Christian and Basque, you were pinned between sinning against God or siding against your language. Miguel Unamuno, who I spoke of before, was between these two evils, trying to juggle both. The Francoists eventually killed him in 1937, probably for refusing to wholly commit to one side or the other. The Basque language had actually been gathering strength just before the Civil War, but the loss of life combined with Franco's early years of dictatorship could have been a death blow to the language if General Franco had gone just a bit further. General Franco said, "The character of each region will be respected, but without prejudice to national unity, which we want absolutely, with a single language, Castilian, and a single personality, Spanish." What this means is that Franco did not go as far as the Nazis or Xi Jinping, the current leader of China, when it came to minority languages. But it was not going to be a nice time for the Basque language, was it? The language was marginalized and oppressed by Franco's regime. Basque poets, writers, and activists were executed by Francoists in the wake of the war and during the war, like the writer Laucheta. Basque language was forbidden from being taught in school. The ring, to punish children who spoke Basque, was brought back. Through the 1940s and 1950s, only occasionally were books in Basque allowed to be published, usually to do with Catholicism or the history and glory of Spain. However, it should be noted that since the Franco regime did not think poetry had much worth, poetry in Basque was allowed to exist to some extent. After all, if you thought poetry was something meaningless for children, what threat was it to you? However, heavily censored. Basque names were banned, and there were random arrests of Basque speakers. With this threat overhead, the Basque language faded from public life, but Basque speakers did find ways to fight back. Decades before, in 1914, a man named Miguel Muñoz began a school teaching Basque called Ikastola, meaning Basque Academy. These Ikastolas spread across the Spanish side of the Basque country, and by the 1930s had grown into a federation of independent schools. These schools were put in the state's hands under Franco, but the network of trained teachers, mostly women, survived the war, with knowledge and supplies to teach children in Basque that had already been set up. So when a brave woman named Elvira Zipitria opened up a secret Ikastola in her home, she had a whole network of former Ikastolas to build from. And she did. A secret network of Ikastolas led by this brave woman, branched out through other women in Donostia, Bilbao, Pamplona, and other places. By law, at least, these ikastolas found loopholes, since they were Christian, and so they existed in a semi-legal status. The authorities did not make it easy for them, but they found ways to exist legally. And in the 1960s, the Francoist regime began to calm down and open up a little bit. Even under the regime, Basque literature went on, though having to squeeze through tight censorship and a complete lack of funding. One thing the regime could not control was people singing, and a singer-songwriter resistance emerged through which people gathered around and shaped a resurgent Basque culture of sorts. A new song movement grew up around the year 1960 of people singing about their culture and their language and the struggle they faced in trying to keep their culture alive in spite of this regime. The authorities did set rules on it so it did not get out of hand, but they couldn't really stop it because you can't ban people singing without just going through with tanks and killing everybody, can you? And though the Franco regime did consider doing that, they just never got around to it. I guess they wanted a siesta in the Spanish sun and they couldn't be bothered. An equilibrium of limited toleration grew between the authorities and the language. Ez do Camairu, or Don't Stop, was a group that formed in 1965 out of this movement, and they became very popular in helping the Basque identity through music. The Basque language was modernizing despite being banned in education and government, which shows great resilience from these people. Earlier in this video, I briefly mentioned a man named Koldo Mitchellena. He fought in the Spanish Civil War on the side of the Basque army against the Franco-nationalists through the whole campaign, to the bitter end. And he was sentenced to death by the regime, and then he miraculously had his sentence reduced to 30 years in prison. I mean, I don't know which one I would prefer, death or 30 years in prison. Anyway, he eventually only served 5 years in prison, and he did work on the Basque language immediately after getting out, despite the authorities harassing him constantly. He actually helped standardize the Basque language. In 1968, a standardized form of Basque came out despite being underneath the regime, which that's an amazing work. I just wanted to mention that they succeeded to do that, and it has helped unify the Basque language despite it forcing some of the dialects of the Basque language out. But it enables them to teach Basque more effectively to children in these Istilicoas. As General Franco aged, his regime did loosen up a bit, and in 1966, the Fraga Law was passed, named after Emmanuel Fraga. This law shifted censorship in Spain from pre-publication to post-publication. On paper, this meant you could publish mostly what you wanted, but if it broke the rules, then, after being in print, you were in trouble. But in real life, it was a way for the state to stop using resources to micromanage everyone. And so from 1966, people were able to use the Basque language a little bit more. Spain began a slow opening up, long before Franco's death in 1975. In 1970, the Spanish state even made the ikastolas legal. But don't think this was any kind of encouragement. Speakers of Basque simply loved their language more than the Francoists hated it. And slowly the Francoists just gave up. I mean, if you're a posh, aristocratic general in the central plateau of Spain, why would you bother going up to the mountains to pester a bunch of people who speak some language that you know nothing about? It's just not in your interest when you have such great weather. Why bother? From after Franco's death in late 1975 to the first peaceful transfer of power in 1982, Spain became a democracy. In 1977, Basque names were made legal again. In 1982, the Basque language was made legal again. The Ikastolas were re-established with government backing. The hardship of the Franco years had made Basques even more passionate about their language. But not until 2023, not until then, would Basque be legal to speak in the Spanish Parliament itself. Since the 1980s, Basque has grown across education and now has over 800,000 speakers. Laws put in place to counter the damage done has reversed the decline in many places. The future is hopeful, however, this depends where you are in the Basque country. In the Basque autonomous community, with local powers devolved, there is steady growth, with over 36% now fluent in the language. In Navarre, the Basque area is not united with autonomy. The decline under Franco has been at least reversed, but it is only 14%. Over the border, however, in the Basque country occupied by the French Republic, it has seen a steady fall in Basque speakers. As you can see, it's quite dire. Overall, I am hopeful for Basque's future, and I hope any Basque speakers watching this video know. If my Welsh language is lost, we have other Celtic languages. If Celtic languages are lost, then French, Dutch, Polish, or Greek will keep our Indo-European heritage alive. When I pray in Hebrew, that connects me to Arabic, even to languages in Ethiopia that are Semitic. But the Basque language is all that is left of the first 34,000 years of human beings in Europe, whatever that world even was. You have a duty, not just to yourselves but to humanity, to keep speaking this. Thank you to my Patreons on the screen now. Diolch yn fawr iawn am wylio.